My boss's secretary framed me for his murder and ruined my life, so I burned every bridge and ran. A year later, she sent a letter from prison, promising she'd finish what she started. I spent most of my 20s working in a dead-end job at an office because in those days that's all you could get without a degree. Needless to say, my boss loved to take advantage of me. He was the type to dump last-minute work on you and then leave early. The type to beat his wife over the Knicks beating the Celtics, as if it was her fault that Jason Tatum is trash. Anyway, there was one thing I did like about him, and that was his secretary Julia. Whenever she could tell I was having a rough day, she'd surprise me with my favorite coffee at lunch, just the way I liked it. And whenever our boss bitched about her to me, I would always defend her. So one day when I was standing beside her and my boss was nowhere to be found, she whispered something to me. "I'd update your LinkedIn tonight if I were you." Her tone was cold and sharp. I sighed. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't. I had poured everything into that corporate shithole, all in the hopes of getting a promotion that never came. I've probably spent a total of 300 hours walking newbies through systems and protocols outside of working hours for free. I've canceled vacations that were planned months in advance because my boss swore he'd keep me in my mind for a better role. I had over 100 days off that I never took, all saved up. I took a deep breath and thanked the secretary, Julia. And in that moment, I knew I needed to hatch a plan. You see, I knew that Daniel, my boss, had dozens of dirty little secrets hidden away because I was friends with all of the female coworkers there, and I was the one who'd saved them, so to speak. I still remember the first time I noticed him in a room late at night with Julia. Most of the office had gone home already, and one of his hands went to cover her mouth while the other began to unbuckle his belt. So I did the first thing I could think of. I triggered the fire alarm. Next thing I knew, the entire office was surrounded with fire trucks and news reporting stations, ready to give out whatever juicy gossip they thought they were going to find. I tried to convince Julia that she needed to come forward, that I would be her witness, but she just said the same thing that every other woman in the office said when I tried to do this. "I can't afford to lose this job. Please stop bringing it up." It was heartbreaking every time, and it enraged me to see Daniel getting away with it. But now that I was getting fired, I could do exactly what I wanted. And I always had the ice hockey mentality, meaning I firmly believed that everything ought to be solved with violence, by any means necessary. So one day, I asked my sister if she could hang around outside of work and follow my boss home. For context, she's a bad bitch and looks harmless, so if she somehow got caught, Daniel wouldn't assume it was me behind it all. She managed to plant evidence to frame him for cheating on his wife, which he obviously was. She threw one of her earrings into the backseat of their car, left a pair of red-hearted undies by their kitchen counter, a suggestive note by the plant pot, and as if by fate, it just so happens that Daniel sleeps with all his windows open. So this was extremely easy to do. A few days later, on the day I was meant to be fired, Daniel never came into work. When I asked Julia what was going on, she told me that he and his wife were going through a sudden divorce. I couldn't even hide my smirk. Julia laughed too, but only because she thought it was karma in the works, instead of yours truly. I knew things were getting really good when he finally returned to work, because for the first time ever, he went the entire day without yelling or trying to take advantage of the interns. Like, wow. So that's when I struck again. Or at least my sister did. That day, I brought Daniel his coffee, but instead of his usual, it was a decaf latte, along with a side of 3 crushed up Benadryl. And sure enough, he ended up going home early in an Uber because he must have had a bad night's sleep last night. That night, my sister snuck into his home and found his depression meds, and she switched it for some harmless vitamin C capsules. Lol. The next day, Daniel looked like crap. His eyes were bloodshot and glassy, his hair was greasy like he had skipped a shower that morning, and he couldn't even make eye contact with anyone, let alone fire me. Me and Julia even joked that he looked like a zombie from that game Plants vs. Zombies LMAO. I'm still not sure what I expected to happen next. Maybe for him to quit and move somewhere else, or to slowly become a better person. Boy, was I wrong. Because a week later, as I had my feet on the coffee table while enjoying some Breaking Bad on Netflix, I got the call. It was Julia. She was in tears and could barely get the words out. "Daniel, he took own life. Dead." My heart dropped. I immediately hung up the phone. That's when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it to see his wife death staring me. Christine stood there in my doorway, her eyes red-rimmed but disturbingly calm. For a second, neither of us said a word. I just stared, completely frozen, heart pounding so loud I thought she'd hear it. She looked exhausted, holding herself tightly as though the slightest breeze might topple her over. It hit me that I'd never seen her like this, not in all those company parties or late nights where she'd show up at the office, always composed, always in control. Now she looked like someone had reached in and pulled out whatever strength she had left. "Can I come in?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It sounded rough and broken, and that shook me more than I wanted to admit. I stepped aside quickly, fumbling to close the door behind her. My thoughts raced, wondering if she knew, if somehow she'd figured out my part in this. Christine moved past me without looking around, heading straight to my kitchen table like she'd been here before, like this was just another one of Daniel's company dinners, and we were about to sit down over drinks and fake smiles. She sat down slowly, carefully pulling the chair out, like any quick movement might break her. I sat down across from her. She looked straight at me then, her gaze piercing. "Did you know?" she asked bluntly, not breaking eye contact. "Know what?" I managed, trying to keep my voice level. "Did you know he was seeing someone else?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. She didn't cry, didn't even tear up. "I heard rumors," I admitted cautiously. "You know how the office is. People talk, but I never actually saw anything." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't entirely true either. My stomach twisted uncomfortably as I watched her reaction, hoping she'd believe me. Christine nodded slowly, seemingly processing this, turning it over in her mind. I didn't either. I mean, I suspected, of course. Daniel was always distant, secretive, but I never thought he'd actually... She rubbed her face tiredly. I felt a sudden urge to comfort her, to reach out and place a hand on her shoulder or say something reassuring, but I stayed perfectly still. "I just needed someone to confirm I'm not crazy," she finally said, shaking her head slightly, "to tell me I'm not imagining things." "You're not," I said quietly. Daniel was complicated. He had a lot going on. We sat there for another few minutes in uncomfortable silence, neither of us knowing exactly what else to say. Christine eventually stood up, steadying herself briefly on the table as if gathering strength. "I'm sorry to bother you. I needed to talk to someone." "It's okay," I said quickly, standing up as well, awkwardly hovering near the table. "If you need anything else, just call. Seriously." Christine paused at my door, turning slightly to face me. "Thanks for listening. I guess I thought you might have known something I didn't. If I had," I lied smoothly, "I would have told you." Without another word, she stepped outside, closing the door softly behind her. I stood rooted in place, listening to her footsteps fade away until I couldn't hear them anymore. Only then did I let out the breath I'd been holding, my knees suddenly weak as I sank back into the chair. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept replaying that conversation over and over, wondering if I'd said too much, if she suspected anything. The guilt pressed down harder than ever, suffocating me as I stared blankly at the ceiling until dawn. In the following weeks, paranoia became my constant companion. I'd glance nervously at every passing car, every unfamiliar face, convinced someone knew my secret. At work, whispers behind closed doors made me tense up, imagining accusations being thrown around. I stopped going out, spent evenings double-checking locks on doors and windows. My sister tried to reassure me, but even her calm confidence couldn't soothe the nagging fear lodged deep inside me. After 3 months, the anxiety became unbearable. My sister suggested moving somewhere new, somewhere fresh, where no one knew us or our past. It seemed drastic, but I was desperate for relief. We packed quickly, leaving behind everything familiar, hoping distance might finally bring peace. But deep down, even as we drove away from the city we'd called home, I knew that moving didn't mean freedom. Not really. Because the thing about guilt is that it travels with you, no matter how far you go. The nightmare started about a week after we moved to a new city. My sister and I sharing a cramped 2-bedroom that smelled perpetually of the Indian restaurant downstairs. I'd wake up gasping, sweat-soaked sheets twisted around my legs, convinced I could hear Daniel's voice whispering, "I'm sorry," right next to my ear, his breath cold against my skin. My sister said it was just guilt, that it would fade with time, her hand rubbing circles on my back as I tried to catch my breath. But I wasn't so sure. I tried to move on. Found a decent job at a marketing firm where nobody knew my past, where I could be just another face in the morning elevator ride. Started going to a gym 3 times a week. The burn in my muscles a welcome distraction from the thoughts in my head. Even went on a few dates with a guy named Vincent who worked at the coffee shop downstairs from my apartment. His smile warm and uncomplicated. Normal stuff. Rebuilding stuff. But the feeling of being watched never quite went away, like phantom fingers trailing down my spine whenever I walked alone. It was little things at first. A car that seemed to be parked outside my building too often. A black sedan with tinted windows that was there when I left for work and there when I came home. An email from a sender named Justice Seeker that contained nothing but a single period. A hang-up call from a blocked number every Tuesday at exactly 9:17 p.m. The silence on the other end somehow louder than any threat. "You're being paranoid," my sister told me over dinner one night, twirling pasta around her fork. She looked better now. Had gained back the weight she'd lost during those terrifying weeks. Her cheeks fuller, her eyes brighter. Had stopped checking over her shoulder constantly. "Christine has no idea where we are. Julia's probably in Mexico living her best life with whatever she blackmailed out of Daniel." I nodded, but I wasn't convinced. The food tasteless in my mouth. "Maybe," I said, pushing my food around my plate. "But what if—" "No more what ifs," she interrupted, reaching across the table to grab my hand. "We're safe. It's over." I wanted to believe her. I really did. Then the package arrived. No return address. Just a small brown box sitting innocently outside my apartment door when I got home from work. I almost didn't open it. Almost threw it straight into the dumpster behind our building. But curiosity won out. Inside was a USB drive and a small card that simply read, Part 2. The letters precise and black against the cream cardstock. My hands trembled as I plugged it into my laptop. Another video file. I clicked play, my throat tight with dread. It was footage from what looks like a hotel room. Bland beige walls and generic artwork. Julia sat on the edge of the bed, talking to someone off camera. Her face looked different, harder, more calculating than I'd ever seen it at the office. Her usual warm smile replaced by something cold and reptilian. "He's becoming a liability," she was saying, her voice crisp and businesslike. "The depression is making him sloppy. He almost told his wife about us last week." A male voice responded, though I couldn't see who it belonged to. "So what do you want to do about it?" Julia smiled, cold and determined. "I think it's time for Daniel to have an unfortunate accident. But first, we need someone to take the fall." The video cut to another clip. Julia in what looks like a car, on the phone. "Yes, Christine, I think you should know. Your husband has been acting strange lately. I'm worried about him, and I think one of our coworkers might be involved somehow." My blood ran cold as I realized what I was watching. Julia setting me up. Julia manipulating Christine. Julia orchestrating everything like a puppet master. Invisible strings attached to all of us. The final clip showed Julia in Daniel's office after hours, going through his desk with practiced efficiency, replacing what looked like med bottles. Not my sister. Julia. I slammed my laptop shut, breathing hard. This changed everything. I hadn't called Daniel. Julia had. She'd used my hatred of him, my sister's willingness to help, all of it as cover for her own plan. A perfect smokescreen for her own murderous intentions. But who sent this video? And why now? Months after we'd fled. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Now you know. What are you going to do about it?" I didn't respond. Couldn't. My mind was racing too fast. 1,000 thoughts colliding. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day trying to track down more information. I searched for Julia online, looking for any trace of where she might have gone after disappearing from our old company. Nothing. As if she'd evaporated like morning dew. By evening, I was frustrated and scared, pacing my apartment like a caged animal. I poured myself a glass of wine and was about to collapse on the couch when my phone rang, the screen lighting up with unknown number. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. Stop looking for her. The voice was disguised, mechanical, and flat. "She knows you're searching. She knows where you are." The line went dead before I could respond. I immediately called my sister, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. "Pack a bag," I told her when she answered. "Don't ask questions. Just come to my place. Now." While waiting for her to arrive, I paced my apartment, checking the locks repeatedly. My mind kept returning to the video. Julia had been the one to replace Daniel's medication. Julia had been the one to push him over the edge. But why frame me? What had I done to her except try to protect her from Daniel's advances? A knock at the door made me jump. I checked the peephole. My sister, looking worried, her overnight bag slung over her shoulder. I let her in and immediately relocked the door. "What's going on?" she asked, setting her overnight bag down. "You look terrible." I showed her the video. Her face grew paler with each passing minute. "Oh my God," she whispered when it ended. "She used us. She fucking used us like pawns in her sick game. And now someone wants me to know that," I added. "The question is, who? And why now?" After all this time, we stayed up late into the night trying to piece it all together. My sister suggested it might be Christine, trying to clear her husband's name posthumously. I thought it might be someone from the office who knew more than they let on. Around 2 a.m., exhausted, my sister fell asleep on the couch. I was about to head to bed myself when my laptop pinged with a new email from unknown@protonmail.com. Subject, the truth about Julia. The message contained only an address in downtown Cincinnati and a time, 10 a.m. tomorrow. I stared at it for a long time. It was obviously a trap. Only a complete idiot would go to a mysterious meeting set up by an anonymous sender after everything that had happened. But I needed answers. I didn't tell my sister about the email. When she woke up the next morning, I told her I had to run to the office for a few hours to catch up on work I'd missed. The address turned out to be a small coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and a vintage clothing boutique. I arrived 20 minutes early, chose a table with my back to the wall, and ordered a coffee I had no intention of drinking. At exactly 10 a.m., a woman walked in. It took me a moment to recognize her without the expensive suits and perfect makeup, but when she turned toward me, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Deborah, Daniel's executive assistant from the floor above ours. We'd barely interacted at the office. She worked directly for the company president and rarely mingled with us lower-level employees. She sat down across from me without asking permission, her eyes hard and evaluating. "You look surprised to see me," she said quietly. "I am," I admitted. "What is this about? Did you send me that video?" She nodded, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "Julia and I were friends once, before she changed, before she started sleeping with Daniel and plotting her way up the corporate ladder." I blinked, trying to process this. "Julia and Daniel were having an affair for nearly 2 years," Deborah confirmed, "but it wasn't about love or even lust. It was about power. Julia wanted Daniel's position. She was using him, gathering dirt on him, manipulating him like a chess master. But why would she cull him?" I asked, keeping my voice low. If she had dirt on him, couldn't she just blackmail him into promoting her? Deborah's mouth twisted into a bitter smile. Daniel was going to end it. He'd finally had enough of her threats. He was going to come clean to his wife, to HR, to everyone. Julia couldn't let that happen. It would have destroyed everything she worked for. So she, what? Used me as a convenient scapegoat? "You made it so easy," Deborah said, not unkindly. "Everyone knew how much you hated him, how protective you were of the women in the office. When things started happening to Daniel, the divorce, the medication issues, you were the obvious suspect. I felt sick. Why are you telling me this now? Why not when it was happening?" "I didn't know the full extent until after," she said. "Julia kept digital journals, password-protected files where she documented everything. I only found them because she asked me to retrieve some files from her computer after she disappeared." "Where is she now?" I asked, leaning forward. That's why I contacted you, Deborah said. She's here, in Cincinnati. She started working at Harlow Media under a new name, Willow Parker. She's looking for you. I don't know why, but she's obsessed with finding you. She calls you unfinished business. You've seen them? My heart was pounding. Deborah nodded. We've been reconnecting. She thinks I'm still her friend, but after what she did to Daniel, to you, to everyone, I can't let her hurt anyone else. She's a monster wearing human skin. What do you want from me? Help me stop her, Deborah said simply. I have access to her apartment. I can get her journals, her records, everything we need to prove what she did, but I can't do it alone. Every instinct told me to run, but running hadn't worked. Julia had found me anyway. When? I asked. Decision made. Tonight. She has a business dinner with potential clients. Her apartment will be empty from 7 to at least 10. I nodded slowly. I'll help, but my sister stays out of this. She's been through enough. Deal, Deborah said, standing up. She handed me a piece of paper with an address. Meet me here at 6:30. Come alone. And be careful. Julia has eyes everywhere. As she walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was making another terrible mistake. I told my sister I had a date to explain my absence for the evening, hating the lie but needing her safely out of the way. I even wrote a quick note explaining everything and sealed it in an envelope, leaving it on my kitchen counter just in case something went wrong. At 6:25, I parked a block away from the address Deborah had given me. It was a modern apartment building in one of the nicer areas of Cincinnati. I spotted Deborah waiting outside, looking nervous, checking her watch repeatedly. Ready? She asked when I approached. I nodded, though ready was the last thing I felt. We took the elevator to the 12th floor. Deborah led me to apartment 1207 and pulled out a key. She gave you a key to her place? I whispered, surprised. Like I said, she thinks we're friends again, Deborah replied, unlocking the door. She trusts me. That's her weakness. She thinks she's smarter than everyone else. Julia's apartment was immaculate. Minimalist furniture in shades of white and gray, everything perfectly arranged like a showroom. Her office is this way, Deborah said, leading me down a hallway. The computer is password protected, but I know what it is. The journals are in a hidden folder called Projects. Typical Julia. Seeing people's lives as something to manage and complete. As Deborah sat down at the desk and began typing, I wandered around the office. There were no personal photos, no mementos. The only decoration was a small framed quote on the wall. Revenge is a dish best served cold. I'm in, Deborah announced. Come look at this. I moved behind her to see the screen. She had opened a folder labeled Projects that contained dozens of files with dates as names. These are her journals, Deborah explained. She documents everything. Plans, thoughts, actions. Like a sociopath's diary. The file opened to reveal pages of text. Julia, or Willow, as she now called herself, had indeed been tracking me. She knew where I lived, where I worked, even where I got coffee in the mornings. She had detailed plans for what she called Phase 2, though what that entailed wasn't clear. Go back, I said suddenly. Check the entries from right before Daniel died. Deborah navigated to files from those dates. There it was. Explicit details of how Julia had replaced Daniel's medication, how she had manipulated Christine, how she had set me up to take the fall. We need to copy these, I said urgently. All of them. It's the only way to prove what really happened. Deborah nodded, pulling a USB drive from her pocket. Already planned on it. As she began copying the files, I continued reading through the journal entries. Julia had been planning Daniel's death for months. She'd been having an affair with him, but also blackmailing him with evidence of financial improprieties she discovered. When he threatened to expose her, she decided he needed to be eliminated. Deborah, I said slowly as a terrible thought occurred to me. How did Julia know I moved to Cincinnati? I didn't tell anyone from the office where I was going. Deborah's hands paused over the keyboard. I don't know. Maybe she hired a private investigator? And how did you find me? I pressed, taking a small step back. How did you know where to send that package with the video? The room seemed to grow colder as Deborah turned to face me, her expression unreadable. I told you. I've been monitoring Julia's activities. She led me to you. No, I said, taking another step back. That doesn't explain how you knew my address. No one knew that except my sister, and the front door opened with a soft click. Right on time, Deborah said, her voice suddenly different, harder, colder. Footsteps approached the office. I looked around frantically for an escape route, but there was only one door, and Deborah was between me and it. Julia appeared in the doorway, looking exactly as I remembered her except for her now blonde hair. She smiled at me, that same warm smile that had once brought me coffee when I was having a bad day. Hello, old friend, she said, her voice honey-sweet with poison underneath. I've been looking for you for a long time. You two are working together, I said, the realization hitting me like a truck. Not exactly, Julia replied. Deborah works for me. Always has. She's quite the actress, isn't she? Almost had you convinced she was on your side. Deborah stood up from the desk, moving to stand beside Julia. Sorry about the deception, she said, not sounding sorry at all. But we needed you to come willingly. It's so much cleaner this way. Why? I demanded. What do you want from me? Julia's smile widened. Closure. You see, you're the loose end in all of this. The one person who knows too much. The one person who could ruin everything I've built. I haven't told anyone, I protested, eyes darting around for anything I could use as a weapon. I took the settlement. I disappeared. I kept my mouth shut about everything. For now, Julia agreed. But for how long? Especially now that you know the truth. She gestured to the computer screen where her journal entries were still displayed. I can't have that hanging over my head forever. So what's your plan? Kill me too? Make it look like another sewer slide? Julia laughed. Nothing so dramatic. I just need insurance. Something to guarantee your continued silence. Like what? Like this, she said, pulling out her phone and showing me the screen. It was a live video feed of my sister's apartment. She was sitting on her couch watching TV completely unaware. You touch her and You'll what? Julia interrupted. Go to the police? Tell them how you drugged your boss and broke into his house? How you drove him to sewer slide? Because that's still the official story. Your fingerprints on the coffee cup, your sister's DNA in his home, your documented hatred of Daniel. She was right. I had no leverage here. What do you want? I asked again, defeated. Julia set her phone down on the desk, the screen still showing my sister. I want you to sign a confession, admitting everything. How you hated Daniel, how you plotted against him, how you replaced his medication. All of it in your own words with your signature at the bottom. Why would I do that? Think of it as mutually assured destruction. You stay quiet about me, I stay quiet about you. But if you ever decide to come forward, well, I have my insurance, both the confession and your sister. Deborah placed a document on the desk in front of me. And if I refuse? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Julia picked up her phone again, zooming in on my sister. Let's just say I have friends who can make accidents happen. Tragic ones. A break-in gone wrong, a car with failed brakes. Fine, I said through gritted teeth. I'll sign it. Julia smiled triumphantly as I picked up the pen Deborah offered. I scanned the document quickly, a detailed confession of how I had systematically destroyed Daniel's life and ultimately caused his death. As I raised the pen to sign, a notification popped up on Julia's phone. She glanced down at it, frowning slightly. Someone's at your sister's door, she said, watching the video feed. I froze, pen hovering above the paper. On the screen, my sister got up to answer the door. When she opened it, I gasped. It was Christine. What the hell? Julia muttered, turning up the volume. Are you Bobby? Christine was asking my sister. I need to talk to you about your sibling. It's important. How did you find me? What do you want? I know what happened to my husband, Christine said. I know about Julia. I know everything. And your sibling is in danger right now. Julia's face drained of color. This isn't possible, she whispered. She can't know. There's no way she could know. I took advantage of her distraction, grabbing the letter opener from the desk and lunging at her. Julia reacted quickly, dodging to the side, but I managed to slash her arm, the blade cutting through her silk blouse and into flesh. She cried out in pain as Deborah grabbed me from behind, pinning my arms. You bitch! Julia hissed, clutching her bleeding arm. You're going to regret that. She picked up her phone again, but what she saw made her freeze. Christine was showing my sister something on her phone. What looked like photos or videos, my sister's expression changing from suspicion to horror. That's why I'm here, Christine was saying. To warn you, Julia's been planning this for months. She's going to try to use you to get to your sibling. She's already lured them into a trap. How did you find your sister? Deborah demanded. How does Christine know any of this? Who told her? Julia didn't answer, her eyes fixed on the screen, watching as my sister's shock turned to determination. My sister was now making a phone call. Her movement's urgent. We need to go, Julia said suddenly. Now. This whole thing is blown. Someone talked. What about her? Deborah asked, nodding toward me. Julia looked at me, calculation in her eyes. Bring her. We might still need leverage. Deborah started to drag me toward the door, but I fought back with everything I had. I stomped hard on her foot, making her loosen her grip just enough for me to break free. I ran for the desk, grabbing Julia's phone before either of them could react. Stop her! Julia shouted. I managed to hit the emergency call button before Deborah tackled me to the ground. The phone skittered across the floor as we struggled. 911. What's your emergency? A voice came from the phone. Help! I screamed as loudly as I could. Apartment 1207 at the Meridian. They're trying to... Deborah's hand clamped over my mouth, cutting off my words. But it was too late. The call had gone through. Julia grabbed her phone, ending the call, but her composure was completely gone now. We have maybe 5 minutes before cops show up, she said. We need to disappear. Now get everything we need. What about her? Deborah asked again. Julia stared at me for a long moment. Leave her. We don't have time. But this isn't over, she added, addressing me directly. Not by a long shot. I'll find you again. I always do. They fled. Footsteps receding down the hallway. I scrambled to my feet and ran to the computer. The USB drive was still plugged in, the file transfer complete. I grabbed it, shoving it into my pocket. I could hear sirens in the distance. I couldn't be there when the police arrived. Not with my history. Not with the settlement agreement I'd signed. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, heart pounding as I raced down 12 flights, bursting out of the emergency exit just as police cars pulled up to the front of the building. I ran all the way back to my car, lungs burning. As soon as I was inside, I called my sister. Are you okay? I demanded when she answered. Is Christine still there? Are you safe? Yes to both, my sister replied. You need to get here now. Christine has proof, actual proof, that Julia called Daniel, and she knows Julia's been stalking us. I'm on my way, I said. Don't let Christine leave, and don't open the door for anyone else. When I arrived at my sister's apartment, I found them both sitting at the kitchen table, a laptop open between them. Christine looked up as I entered, her eyes hard but no longer filled with hatred. You, she said simply. Me, I agreed, approaching cautiously. My sister says you have proof about Julia. Christine nodded, turning the laptop so I could see the screen. Daniel wasn't as oblivious as Julia thought. He suspected she was up to something. He installed spyware on her work computer months before he died, trying to gather evidence against her. On the screen was an email from Julia to Deborah, dated 2 weeks before Daniel's death. D is becoming a problem. His threats to expose me can't be allowed to continue. The plan is in motion. Our mutual friend has already started laying groundwork with the planted evidence. Once D is gone, the blame will fall exactly where we want it. Then the position is mine. I sat down heavily. Our mutual friend. She was talking about me. She manipulated me into targeting Daniel. Christine's mouth tightened. You still did what you did. You still helped destroy my husband, whether you knew the full plan or not. I know, I said quietly. And I'm sorry. I truly am. But I never wanted him dead. He wasn't perfect, Christine admitted. But he didn't deserve what happened to him. My sister looked between us. So what do we do now? Julia and Deborah are still out there. They threatened me. They tried to force a confession from you. They're not going to just give up. We go to the police, Christine said firmly. I have dozens of emails like this one, plus Daniel's own records of Julia's blackmail attempts. It's enough to open an investigation. I hesitated, thinking of the settlement I'd signed, the non-disclosure agreement that bound me. But what choice did I have? Julia wouldn't stop. Okay, I said finally. But first, there's something you both need to see. I pulled out the USB drive I'd taken from Julia's computer and plugged it into my sister's laptop. The journal entries appeared on screen. Detailed, damning evidence of Julia's plot against Daniel. Against me. Against who knew how many others. Christine read in silence, her face growing paler with each paragraph. When she finished, she looked up at me, tears in her eyes. He tried to tell me someone was setting him up, she whispered. I didn't believe him. I thought he was just making excuses. I reached out hesitantly and placed my hand over hers. Julia fooled all of us. She was playing a game none of us even knew we were in. My sister suddenly pointed at the screen. Look at this entry from last week. She mentioned someone named Albert. Says he's in position and ready when needed. I frowned. Albert Suzuki. Why does that name sound familiar? Christine's eyes widened. He's the new security guard at my apartment building. He just started 2 weeks ago. We all looked at each other as the implications sank in. She'd been 10 steps ahead of us the entire time. We need to go, I said urgently. All of us. Right now. It's not safe here. As if to emphasize my point, my sister's phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. Albert says hello. Front door in 30 seconds. I grabbed my sister's arm and pulled her toward the back door. Fire escape. Now move. Christine was already on her feet, laptop clutched against her chest. What about my car? It's parked out front. Leave it, I hissed. The car's not worth your life. We clambered down the metal stairs as quietly as possible. When we reached the bottom, I peered around the corner of the building. No sign of Albert, at least not yet. My car's 2 blocks over, I whispered. Stay close and keep your heads down. We made it to my car without incident, piling in with Christine in the passenger seat and my sister in the back. I started the engine and pulled away from the curb, forcing myself to drive normally despite the urge to floor it. Where are we going? My sister asked, her voice shaking. I know a place, Christine said. My brother has a hunting cabin about an hour outside the city. No internet, no landline, completely isolated. Julia wouldn't know about it. I never mentioned my brother to anyone at the company. The cabin was exactly as Christine had described. Isolated, rustic, and completely off the grid. Perfect for hiding. Terrible for getting help if we needed it. Once inside, we gathered around the kitchen table with the laptop and USB drive, piecing together everything we knew. Christine's evidence combined with Julia's journals painted a clear picture. Julia had been systematically manipulating everyone around her for years. She used me, I said, staring at an entry where Julia detailed how she noticed my hatred for Daniel and decided to exploit it. She knew exactly which buttons to push. She used all of us, Christine corrected. Daniel was just an obstacle to be removed. I was collateral damage. My sister spoke up. So what's our next move? We can't hide here forever. She was right. We needed a plan, not just to escape Julia, but to stop her permanently. We go to the police, Christine said firmly. With both sets of evidence, they'll have to investigate. I shook my head. It's not that simple. I signed an NDA with the company. Plus, I did substance Daniel. I did help plant evidence in his home. Those are crimes. So what? We just let Julia get away with murder? Christine demanded. No, I said, an idea forming. We set a trap. We hit her at her own game. The plan was risky, but it was the best we could come up with. Christine would reach out to Julia, claiming she had Daniel's spyware evidence and wanted to make a deal. She'd arrange a meeting at a public place. Meanwhile, I'd contact Marcus from IT, the one person from my old job I still somewhat trusted, and ask him to recover any digital evidence that might still exist on the company servers. The next morning, Christine made the call while I listened on speaker. I know what you did to Daniel, she said when Julia answered. I have proof. There was a long pause before Julia responded, her voice perfectly calm. I don't know what you're talking about, Christine. Daniel took his own life. It was tragic, but cut the crap, Christine interrupted. I have the spyware data, all the emails between you and Deborah, all the plans, everything. Another pause. What do you want? Money, Christine said following our script. 500,000, cash. Then I disappear with all the evidence. Julia laughed. And why would I believe you'd actually disappear? Because I don't care about justice, Christine lied smoothly. I care about surviving. This is business, not personal. Fine, Julia said. Where and when? Riverside Cafe, tomorrow, noon. Come alone. No Deborah, no Albert. I'll be there, Julia said, then hung up. Marcus was hesitant at first, but when I explained the situation, he agreed to help. He still had backdoor access to the company servers and promised to look for any communications between Julia and Deborah. If it was on a company device, I can find it, he assured me. But this is seriously illegal. You know that, right? I know, I said. But it's about justice for Daniel, about stopping Julia before she hurts anyone else. That seemed to convince him. I'll call you tomorrow morning with whatever I find. We spent the rest of the day preparing. Christine contacted a lawyer friend who agreed to meet us at the cafe, posing as a customer but ready to witness anything that happened. That night, none of us slept well. I kept thinking about Daniel's face in that video, the desperation in his eyes as he insisted he was being set up. He'd been telling the truth, and no one believed him. Morning came too quickly. Marcus called as promised, his voice excited. I found something big, he said. Deleted emails between Julia and Deborah discussing Daniel's medication. They specifically mention replacing it with placebos to destabilize him. There's even one where Julia talks about our convenient scapegoat. I'm guessing that's you. Relief flooded through me. Can you send them to me? Already did, and I made copies. Stored them offsite, just in case. With Marcus's evidence added to our collection, we had an ironclad case against Julia. All we needed now was to get her to incriminate herself at the meeting. Christine and I arrived at the Riverside Cafe an hour early, choosing a table in the corner with a clear view of the entrance. Her lawyer friend James sat at a nearby table, pretending to work on his laptop alert to everything happening around him. At exactly noon, Julia walked in. She looked different. Her hair was now dark brown, cut in a sleek bob, and she wore glasses I'd never seen before. She spotted Christine and walked directly to our table, her eyes narrowing when she noticed me. What is this? She asked, remaining standing. Our agreement was to meet alone. Change of plans, Christine said coolly. Sit down, Julia. Or should I call you Willow now? Julia's jaw tightened, but she sat, keeping her purse close on her lap. Where's the money? She demanded. Where's Deborah? I countered. A flicker of something crossed Julia's face. Not here. This is between us. Is it? Christine pulled out her phone and placed it on the table. Because I have evidence that says otherwise. Evidence that you and Deborah conspired to cull my husband. Julia's laugh was brittle. That's absurd. Daniel called himself. Everyone knows that. After you replaced his depression medication with placebos, I said quietly. After you manipulated his wife. After you pushed him to the breaking point. You can't prove any of that, Julia said, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. Actually, we can, Christine said, sliding her phone across the table. Take a look. Julia picked up the phone cautiously, scrolling through the emails Marcus had recovered. Her expression remained neutral, but I noticed her knuckles whitening as she gripped the phone tighter. These could be faked, she said finally. They could be, I agreed, but they weren't. And that's just the beginning. We have your journals too, Julia. The ones where you detail everything. How you used me, how you planned Daniel's death, how you're still tracking me and my sister. For the first time, Julia looked genuinely alarmed. How did you get access to your computer? I finished for her. Let's just say Deborah isn't as loyal as you think. It was a bluff, but Julia's reaction told me it hit home. Her eyes darted around the cafe. What do you want? She asked, her voice tight. Justice, Christine said simply. For Daniel. For everyone you've hurt. Julia leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. Listen to me carefully. If you go to the police with this, I'll make sure they know everything about your involvement, she said, looking directly at me. The drugging, the breaking and entering, all of it. You'll go down with me. Maybe, I acknowledged. But I'm willing to take that risk. I'm willing to face consequences for my actions. Are you? Julia's expression hardened. And what about your sister? Are you willing to risk her too? Because Albert is still out there. One text from me and Albert Suzuki was arrested this morning, James said, suddenly appearing at our table. Attempted breaking and entering. He's already talking to the police, trying to cut a deal. Julia's face drained of color. Who the hell are you? James Anderson, attorney at law. He placed a business card on the table. And you're in serious trouble, Mr. Parker. Or should I say, Ms. Reynolds? Julia stood abruptly, grabbing her purse. This conversation is over. Sit down, Christine said, her voice like steel. Or I call Detective Willow right now and tell him you're trying to flee. He's very interested in Daniel's case being reopened. Julia froze. Detective who? Harley Willow, James supplied. Cincinnati PD. He's very interested in Daniel's case being reopened. He's actually waiting for my call right now. I could see Julia reassessing, looking for an escape, but she was trapped, and she knew it. Slowly, she sat back down. Here's what's going to happen, Christine said. You're going to confess. Everything. On record. In exchange, I'll ask the prosecutor to consider a reduced sentence. And why would I do that? Julia asked, her voice barely audible. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. A text conversation with Deborah that Marcus had helped me fake. Because Deborah already has. I lied. She's giving her statement to Detective Willow right now. Julia stared at the fake texts, disbelief washing over her face. She wouldn't. She can't prove anything without your journals? I finished. The ones we copied from your computer? The ones that detail every step of your plan? The ones that are already in police hands? For a long moment, Julia said nothing. Then with a defeated sigh, she looked up at Christine. I never meant for Daniel to die, she said quietly. I just wanted him broken, discredited. I wanted his job. His death was an unexpected complication. Tell that to the police, Christine replied. Tell that to his family. James made a call, and 20 minutes later, Detective Willow arrived. Julia went with him without resistance, her eyes vacant as she was led away. The aftermath was messy, as I'd expected. I had to come clean about my role in Daniel's torment, though Christine backed up my claim that I had no knowledge of Julia's larger plan. The company tried to enforce the NDA, but James argued successfully that it was void due to the criminal nature of what it was covering up. In the end, Julia and Deborah both went to prison. Julia for second-degree murder, Deborah as an accessory. I got community service and probation for the drugging incident, largely thanks to my cooperation and Christine's surprising advocacy on my behalf. You were manipulated, she told me outside the courthouse after the sentencing. We all were. Julia is a master at it. That doesn't excuse everything, but it explains a lot. That doesn't excuse what I did, I said, still unable to look her in the eye. I'm sorry, Christine. Truly. For all of it. She nodded, her expression solemn but no longer hostile. I know, and I believe you. That's why I spoke for you today. We never became friends, Christine and I. Too much had happened between us, but we reached a kind of peace, an understanding born from shared trauma. My sister and I moved again, this time to Portland, where the constant rain seemed to wash away some of the darkness that had followed us. I found work at a small marketing agency where nobody knew my history. She started taking classes at the community college, studying psychology. I want to understand people like Julia, she explained over dinner one night. Maybe help prevent others from becoming like her. Sometimes late at night, I still think about Daniel. About the man I hated so viciously based on what I saw and what Julia wanted me to see. Was he really the monster I believed him to be? Or was that another of Julia's manipulations? I received a letter from Julia last month, prison stationery. Her handwriting is perfect as ever. I underestimated you, she wrote. It won't happen again. I burned the letter and scattered the ashes in the wind, watching them disappear into the gray Portland sky. Some threats you just learn to live with, some games never truly end, but at least now I know the rules, and I'm no longer playing blind.